That Christmas Eve, standing in my aunt's warm, cinnamon-scented kitchen, I overheard it. Your parents threw a beautiful party last night. My stomach hollowed out. A party in Spokane, in the house I helped pay for, but no invitation for me. The next morning, opening my banking app, the list of auto payments read like a confession. I knew then if they could erase me with polite silence, I could erase my role as the family bank with just 3 clicks. My name is Skylar Parker. I am 32. I work in finance in Santa Barbara, which really just means I wrangle spreadsheets for people who own yachts, and I pretend it's fulfilling. For the past decade, my real job, the one that doesn't pay, has been managing the delicate emotional and financial ecosystem of my family back in Spokane, Washington. This year, I was going to fix Christmas. The drive was 14 hours. I did it straight through, fueled by gas station coffee that tasted like burnt ambition and the idealized image in my head. I left Santa Barbara while it was still 72 degrees and sunny, a Tuesday that felt like summer. I arrived in Spokane to a world encased in ice. It was 19 degrees, the sky a flat, unforgiving gray, and the roads were treacherous. I hadn't told anyone I was coming, not my mother, Margaret, or my stepfather. Walt, this was the grand surprise. I'd shipped the expensive gifts ahead. I pictured the hugs, the tearful, you drove all this way in this weather. I pictured myself, the beautiful daughter, swooping in to save the holiday, to make it perfect, just like I always did. I went to my Aunt Lan's house first, the traditional Christmas Eve gathering spot for the extended family. My real destination, my parents' house, could wait until the big reveal tomorrow morning. Aunt Lan's house was chaos in the best way. It smelled overwhelmingly of cinnamon, melting butter, and the slightly sharp scent of drying pine needles. It was loud, steaming hot, and packed. Skylar, my God, you made it. My cousin Sophie, younger by 10 years and perpetually enthusiastic, launched herself at me. We didn't think you were coming. Just got in, I said, hugging her back, the cold from outside still clinging to my coat. Wanted to surprise everyone. Oh, that's amazing, she beamed, pulling away, her phone already in her hand. You just missed the big party, though. Mom and Walt's was last night, Christmas Eve. It was beautiful. Seriously, your mom went all out. I froze, the smile tightening on my face. Last night. I thought everyone was just doing their own thing. Oh, no. It was huge, Sophie said, oblivious, already swiping through her camera roll. Everyone was there. Uncle Ray, the Hendersons, everyone from their church group. Look. She turned the phone screen toward me, and there it was, my mother, Margaret, standing by their fireplace. She was wearing the deep red cashmere sweater I'd sent her last month, the one that cost a fortune. She was smiling, her arm linked with Walt's, and next to them, the tree. It wasn't just any tree. It was the 9-foot premium Fraser fir from the expensive lot downtown, the one I'd paid for. The one I'd ordered and had delivered because Mom had called me complaining that the cheap lot smelled like gas, and her back was too sore to go looking. It represented my entire Tier 12 bonus from last year. It was magnificent, draped in white lights and the antique glass ornaments I'd painstakingly wrapped and stored for her 2 years ago. It looks amazing, I managed to say, my voice sounding thin. Aline, right? Sophie scrolled, oblivious to the fact that my blood had turned to slush. We all kept saying, too bad Skylar's not here. But Mom said you were just completely slammed with year-end stuff at the bank. You know, Skylar, she said, always so busy. She said she didn't want to pressure you into making the drive. Always so busy, the polite, clean phrase they used to delete me, the excuse that made me sound important and dedicated when, in reality, it was just a convenient way to box me out. My throat closed. The smell of cinnamon was suddenly suffocating. Excuse me, I mumbled, pushing past her, aiming for the hallway. I think the allergies in here, all the pine. Need a tissue. I escaped into the narrow hall, leaning against the cool drywall, my heart hammering a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I pulled out my phone. The screen was black, then lit up with my own face, pale and stunned. Nothing. The screen was black, then lit up with my own face, pale and stunned. Nothing. No missed calls, no sorry you couldn't make it texts, no thinking of you emails. The screen was a barren wasteland of notifications from my finance apps. I scrolled up, checking my own sent messages. My last text to my mother, 3 days ago, driving up for the holiday. See you soon. Excited. Her reply, a few hours later, drive safe. Can't wait. Can't wait. I stared at the words. Can't wait for what? For me to arrive at an empty house. For me to see the photos on Instagram. The lie was so blatant, so cold. My gaze drifted to Aunt Lan's overflowing corkboard. A chaotic collage of school pictures, save the dates, and old utility bills. Tacked right in the middle, gleaming under the hallway light, was a Christmas card. Our Christmas card, the one from last year. The photo was taken at Lake Coeur-d'Alene. I had insisted on it. I'd paid for the photographer. I'd spent an hour arranging them, Mom, Walt, Sophie, because she was practically a daughter to my mom and me. I'd steamed Walt's shirt. I'd fixed Mom's hair. I'd used Photoshop to remove the stray hairs and the shadow that made my mom's chin look unflattering. I'd created the image of the perfect family, a perfect, happy lie that I had engineered, curated, and paid for. And there it was, pinned up for everyone to see, a testament to a reality that only existed because I funded it. I couldn't breathe the cinnamon anymore. I couldn't listen to the laughter. I turned, went back to the living room, grabbed my coat from the pile, and slipped out the front door. No one noticed. The cold was immediate and violent. It was 19 degrees, but it felt like absolute zero. It cut through my thin sweater and jeans, stinging my skin, but I welcomed it. It was honest. I got into my rental car, the upholstery stiff and freezing, the engine turning over with a low, pained groan. The radio, which I'd left on, came to life automatically, tuned to the all-holiday station. Judy Garland's voice filled the small, dark car. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. I slammed my hand against the power button so hard my palm stung. Silence. I sat there in the dark, watching my breath fog up the windshield, erasing the view of Lan's warm, bright house. The drive to the Airbnb was 5 miles, but it felt like 100. It was a sterile little daylight basement apartment I'd rented, not wanting to impose until Christmas morning. The owner, trying to be festive, had left a small, 3-foot plastic tree on a side table. Its colored lights blinked in a frantic, synthetic, offbeat rhythm, blue, green, red, yellow, off. Blue, green, red, yellow, off. I sat on the edge of the uncomfortable sofa, the silence of the room deafening after the party. I was still wearing my coat. The sad little tree kept blinking. I took a picture of it with my phone, a perfect, symmetrical counterpoint to the photo on Sophie's phone, the grand 9-foot fur I'd paid for and the lonely 3-foot plastic thing I was left with. They just forgot. The thought surfaced, weak and unconvincing. It was a last-minute thing. They didn't want to bother me. But my mother, Margaret Parker, did not forget. This was a woman who balanced the social calendars of 3 different church committees, who knew the birthdays of every second cousin, who sent thinking of you cards for surgical anniversaries. My mother didn't forget dentist appointments, let alone a fully catered Christmas Eve party in the house I subsidized. Forgetting in her world was not an accident. It was a decision. It was a tool. I thought about last year, not just the photo. I thought about the actual decorating. I'd flown in, spent 3 days untangling lights, hanging wreaths, and baking cookies she would take to her potlucks. I remembered hanging the last ornament at 2 o'clock in the morning, my fingers raw and sticky with sap, because she'd gone to bed hours earlier. My back is just killing me, Sky, she'd sighed, retreating to her room with a heating pad. You're so much better at this anyway. I did it. I always did it because that's what I do. I'm the infrastructure. I'm the plumbing. You only notice me when the checks stop clearing, or the toilet backs up. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, the vibration loud against the wood. I flinched. Maybe it was her. Maybe she'd heard from Lan that I was in town. That I was upset. A notification. Instagram. It was Sophie. She had just posted. The photo was bright, professionally lit, probably taken by one of Walt's camera nerd friends. It was the whole group from the party, Mom, Walt, Aunt Lan, Uncle Ray, Sophie, all of them, all in matching red sweaters. They were raising glasses of champagne. The 9-foot tree blazed behind them. And the caption, sitting underneath the sea of smiling faces. The best family Christmas. So blessed to have everyone we love under one roof. That's when the ice in my veins, the cold from the porch, didn't just chill me, it hardened. The hollow ache in my chest didn't break. It crystallized into something solid and sharp. The pain was still there, a deep throb of betrayal. But it was no longer just pain. It was clarity. It was resolve. I was not family. I was a resource. And as I sat there in the cold, dark apartment, illuminated only by the frantic, mocking lights of a plastic tree, I realized resources can be shut off. I didn't sleep. I spent Christmas Day in the sterile silence of the Airbnb, watching the snow pile up in thick, wet drifts against the basement window. The world outside was muted, buried. It felt appropriate. I didn't answer the Merry Christmas texts from distant relatives or co-workers. I didn't call anyone, and no one called me. Not Mom, not Walt, not Sophie. The silence from their end was absolute. It was the sound of a door being deliberately, quietly, and firmly locked. The manic blinking lights of the 3-foot plastic tree finally drove me mad around noon. I unplugged it, plunging the room into a flat grey light. I ordered the only food I could find for delivery, lukewarm chow mein, and ate it directly from the white paper carton. By the morning of the 26th, the hollow ache from Christmas Eve had solidified. The ice was no longer in my veins, it was my veins. I was calm. I was lucid. I was, for the first time in my 32 years, completely and utterly disillusioned. I waited until 10 a.m., a civilized hour. I dialed my mother's number. My hand was perfectly steady as I held the phone to my ear. It rang 3 times. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Her voice was a symphony of warmth and cheerful surprise, the one she reserved for church acquaintances and the neighbors she wanted to impress. We were wondering when we'd hear from you. We figured you were just swamped with work. Merry Christmas, Mom, I said. My voice was level, devoid of any emotion I was feeling. I'm in Spokane. I drove up. A pause. It was fractional, barely a skipped beat in her rhythm, but I heard it in the background. I heard the distinct, heavy thud click of her stainless steel refrigerator door closing. You're here. The surprise in her voice was genuine now, but it was laced with something else. Not delight, something closer to inconvenience. Skylar, honey, why didn't you say you drove in this weather? My goodness, when did you get in? Christmas Eve, I said. I stopped by Aunt Lan's party. The second pause was longer, heavier. She knew exactly what that meant. I had seen the evidence. Oh, she said, the brightness of her voice dimmed by 20%. Oh, goodness, you should have come straight here, honey. Why were you hiding out at Lan's? I heard you had your party on Christmas Eve, too, I said. Ah? The sound was small, an exhalation. This was the pivot. It was just a tiny thing. Sky, a little last-minute get-together. Walt's cousins were in town unexpectedly. And you know how it is. It just snowballed. Sophie showed me the pictures. It looked big. Everyone was there. You were wearing the new red sweater. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Truly. She was rushing now, her words tumbling out, trying to spackle over the crack in the foundation. Everyone adored it. But oh, honey, you know Sophie, she makes everything look like a Hollywood premiere with that phone of hers. It was just a few neighbors, barely anyone. We were cleaning up by 9:30. The lie was so effortless. We honestly didn't even think to call you, she continued, gaining momentum. We just knew you'd be exhausted and completely slammed with all your year-end reports. We didn't want to add one more ounce of pressure to your plate. You're always so busy working so hard. We just wanted you to be able to rest. The official story, the one they had all clearly rehearsed. We excluded you for your own good. It was the same excuse, polished and presented as a gift. They hadn't just erased me. They had done it out of love. I didn't respond. I just held the phone to my ear, letting the silence of my cold basement apartment stretch across the line, a stark contrast to the fabricated warmth of her story. Sky, are you there? Honey, don't be upset. I'm not upset, Mom. I'm just clarifying. Well, there's nothing to clarify. Skylar, it was just a party. Don't be so dramatic. And there it was, the trigger. The two words that had been the anesthetic for every wound she had ever inflicted. I was 12 at my father's funeral, sobbing into my hands. My mother's fingernails had dug into my shoulder. Her voice, a sharp whisper. Stop it. You're making a scene in front of everyone. Don't be dramatic. I was 23, crying on the phone after being laid off from my first real job, terrified I couldn't make rent. Well, that's just the real world, Skylar. Everyone gets fired. Don't be dramatic. I was 30. Admitting to her, in a moment of weakness, that I was profoundly, crushingly lonely. Loneliness is a choice, honey. You have a wonderful job, and a nice apartment. You have nothing to be sad about. Don't be dramatic. Don't be dramatic, was my mother's way of saying, your feelings are inconvenient for me. Please put them away. I'm not being dramatic, I said, and the coldness in my own voice startled me. I'm stating a fact. I'm looking at an Instagram post of my entire family celebrating Christmas in the house I pay the mortgage for, and I wasn't invited. That's not drama. It's just what happened. The warmth in her voice vanished, replaced by a defensive chill that matched my own. You do not pay the mortgage, Skylar. You help us. You offered to help. That is a very, very different thing. Don't you dare throw that in my face. Is Walt there? I asked. I'd like to speak to Walt. I heard a muffled sound, her hand covering the receiver. She's on the phone. I don't know what's wrong with her. She's accusing us. A moment later, Walt's voice came on the line. He was the perpetual good cop, the man who had coasted into an early retirement on a vague bad back diagnosis that never seemed to flare up during golf season. Hey there, Sky Girl. What's the trouble? His voice was breezy, a tempting calm patriarch. Hi, Walt. I was just wondering why I wasn't invited to the Christmas Eve party. Ah, geez. He let out a little puff of air. You know, it was just a small thing. Your mom sighed. Really? And with all that snow coming down, we just figured, well, it wasn't worth the long drive from the coast, you know, just for a few hours. I texted Mom 3 days ago, I said, my voice flat. I told her I was already on my way, that I was driving. Walt, unlike my mother, was a terrible liar. He didn't pivot, he just stalled. Oh, well, hell. Must have missed that one. Look, don't make a big deal of this, kiddo. It was just some carols and eggnog. We'll see you for dinner tonight, right? We're doing the big roast. We'll make up for it. They didn't get it. They didn't want to get it. They thought this was about missing some stale sugar cookies and a glass of eggnog. They thought I was a child pouting over a missed playdate. No one asked, are you okay? No one asked, where are you staying? No one asked, you drove 14 hours in a snowstorm. Are you safe? It was just, don't make a big deal. Don't be dramatic. Your feelings are an inconvenience. No, Walt, I said. I don't think I'll make it to dinner tonight, or ever. Well, suit yourself, he said, his easygoing tone immediately shifting to annoyed. The mask of the laid-back stepdad fell away, revealing the irritation beneath. No need to pout, Skylar. We'll see you when we see you. The line clicked dead. He had hung up on me. I set my phone down on the cheap particle board desk. I stared at the blank wall. I felt nothing, just an absolute, echoing void. The phone buzzed on the desk, a text message. My heart gave a stupid, traitorous leap. An apology. Mom realizing she'd gone too far. Walt feeling guilty. I picked it up. The message was from Sophie. Hey Sky. OMG. Thank you. Thank you. I just checked my portal and the hold is gone. The spring semester payment went through perfectly. You are an actual lifesaver. Seriously, are you in town? We have to get coffee before you leave. I read the text once, twice. The entitlement was so casual, so breezy, it was almost impressive. Thanks for the several thousand. By the way, the photos from the party I attended without you were great. Right? Coffee. It wasn't a thank you. It was a receipt. It was confirmation that the transaction was complete. It was just another item on the Skylar Parker checklist. The automatic daughter. I didn't reply to Sophie. I turned off my notifications. I opened my laptop. The screen flared to life, illuminating the dim grey room. I logged into my bank, the main portal, the dashboard I looked at every single day for my job, but never ever for myself. There in the right-hand sidebar was the scheduled payments widget. The list was long. It always was, but I hadn't really looked at it, not as a whole, not as a story. I had set up the first payment 7 years ago, when Walt retired, and Mom insisted her part-time admin job just couldn't cover the new baseline. Just for a few months, Sky, she had cried into the phone. Just until we get stable. I promise. 7 years of just a few months. I scrolled down the list. Pioneer Home Lending, amount $2,180. Scheduled first of the month. The mortgage on the house I wasn't invited to. Spoken City Utilities, amount $340, scheduled 5th of the month. Water, sewer, garbage. Avista Energy, amount $290, scheduled 5th of the month. Gas and electric to keep the house warm and the 9-foot tree lit. Bennett's Pharmacy, amount $165. Scheduled 10th of the month. Mom's various prescriptions for her various convenient ailments. Gonzaga University, amount $4,000, $500. Sophie's spring tuition installment. She's like a daughter to me, Sky. And she's so smart. It would be a crime to let that brain go to waste just because her parents are useless. And on and on. The internet bill, the cell phone family plan, which I noted with a grimace only had my name on the billing address. The car insurance for their Subaru. I clicked into my statement history. I scrolled back. Not just months, I scrolled back years. 7 years of bank statements. A digital archaeology of my own exploitation. It hadn't just continued, it had grown. The requests for help always correlated perfectly with my bonus schedules in December and June. The emergencies, the broken water heater, the car transmission, the dental implants, always popped up right after my annual performance reviews. I wasn't their daughter. I was their fourth quarter. I was their most reliable revenue stream. I was the angel investor in the startup called their lives. The realization was so vast, so complete, that it was almost peaceful. They didn't invite me to the party, because you don't send a personal invitation to the ATM. You just visit it when you need cash. You just visit it when you need cash. The hot, searing rage I expected to feel never came. The tears of betrayal were dry. I was past that. I took out the small black notebook I usually used for tracking my own meager savings goals. I opened it to a fresh, blank page. I wrote one sentence at the top, "Why am I doing this?" I stared at the question. I had no good answer because I'm a good daughter, because they need me, they needed my money because it's what family does. Apparently not. I wrote another line beneath it, the pen pressing hard into the paper. It's time to review the portfolio. I closed the laptop. The click of the lid was quiet, but it felt like a gunshot in the silent room. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't pounding. The ice hadn't melted. It had become my spine. I sat there in the cold Airbnb, the unplugged plastic tree standing dark in the corner. And I felt nothing at all, just the hard, clean, perfect quiet of a final decision being made. I didn't just close the laptop. I opened the small black notebook again, the one from the night before. My own question from the previous page. Why am I doing this? Stared back at me. It felt naive. A child's question. The real question, the one a 32-year-old finance professional should be asking, was different. What is the exact itemized cost of this liability? I turned to a fresh page. I am, at my core, a person who understands spreadsheets. I needed to see the data stripped of the emotional baggage. I drew a line down the middle of the page. Left column, pay. Right column, monthly cost. I started writing, Pioneer Home Lending. I wrote $2,180. Avista Energy, I wrote $290, noting average beside it. Spoken City Utilities, $340. Bennett's Pharmacy, M. Parker, $165. Gonzaga University, S. Miller. This one was quarterly, so I prorated it, $750 a month. Sophie Miller, her actual last name. Not that she ever used it when asking me for money. The list went on. The cell phone family plan, where only my name appeared on the billing address. The car insurance for their Subaru. I ran the total at the bottom of the page. The number was staggering. It was more than my own mortgage for my condo in Santa Barbara. It was a significant portion of my post-tax income. Underneath the total, I wrote a note, origination, 7 years prior. Walt's early retirement. I remembered the phone call, as if it were yesterday. My mother weeping, not small, dignified tears, but full-blown, gasping sobs that made the phone receiver distort. He just can't take the stress anymore, Sky, he's back. The doctor said it's just too much. And then the hook, the one that had snagged me so perfectly. It's just for a few months, honey. Just until we get the disability sorted out and can restructure. I promise. Just a few months. 7 years. 84 months of just a few months. My laptop was still open. I went to my email archives. I searched my mother's email address. The results flooded the screen. A decade of correspondence. I typed thank you into the search bar. The results were plentiful. Thanks for handling that. Honey, you're a lifesaver. That was the new water heater, 3 years ago. An emergency. Thanks, sweetheart. The pharmacy text came through. That was last month. Thanks, Sky. Sophie is all set for the semester. This one was actually from Sophie, in September. The thank yous were always brief, always functional. They were acknowledgements of a service rendered. They were the kind of perfunctory email you send to the IT department when they finally fix your printer. I cleared the search bar. I typed permission. 0 results. I typed ask. 0 results. I typed could you. 0 results. Not one email in 7 years asked if I could pay. The language was always presumptive. We need the bill for. Don't forget. It was never a request. It was an assignment. I couldn't stay in that grey room anymore. The stale air and the dark plastic tree were suffocating me. I felt the walls closing in. I grabbed my keys and my coat. I needed noise. I needed coffee. I needed to hear a voice that wasn't mine and wasn't theirs. As I walked out into the biting spoken cold, the thick, dry snow crunching under my boots, I dialed Julia. She's my best friend, my anchor in Santa Barbara. She answered on the second ring, her voice immediately warm. Hey, you alive? I figured you were deep in the family zone. How's the perfect Christmas, Julia? I said, and my voice, which had been so cold and steady all morning, cracked. The ice I'd been holding onto so tightly, the thing I was using as a spine, suddenly fissured. Skylar, what's wrong? What happened? Are you okay? I told her everything. The 14-hour drive, the cinnamon smell at Land's, Sophie's phone, the 9-foot tier 12 bonus tree I had paid for, the red cashmere sweater, the Instagram post captioned Family Christmas. I told her about the phone call this morning, the tiny party, the don't be dramatic. Julia was silent for a long moment, just listening. She's not a jump in and fix it person. She's a let the bomb detonate fully person. When I finished, her voice was quiet, but it was furious. They didn't just forget you, Sky. That's what you keep saying. They didn't forget. They replaced you. They kept the part of you they liked, the bank account, and they threw a party without the person attached to it. She said I was helping, I whispered, the wind stinging my eyes and making them water. She said. I offered. No, honey, Julia said, her voice firm, cutting through the static of the wind. You weren't helping. Helping implies a temporary situation. You were funding. You were their primary operating budget. That isn't love, Skylar. That is dependency. It's parasitic. The word hung in the air. Parasitic. It was ugly. It was biological. It was accurate. What do I do? You already know, she said, her voice softening slightly. You're just calling me for permission. You don't need it. You're the one holding all the cards. You have to decide to play them or keep funding the game. I hung up and found a coffee shop on Division. It was bright, sterile, and packed with Gonzaga students typing on laptops, ignoring each other, anonymity. It was perfect. I ordered the largest black coffee they had and sat in a corner booth, facing the door. I opened my laptop again. This wasn't the emotional review from last night. This was an audit. I went back 7 years. I exported the CSV files from my bank. I filtered by payee. Pioneer Home Lending, 84 consecutive payments. Not one missed, not one late. Avista Energy, 84 payments. It was perfect. A flawless payment history. I wasn't just a good daughter. I was an A++ credit risk. I expanded my search beyond the auto payments. I looked at my Zelle history, my Venmo, the one-offs, the little hemorrhages of cash I'd forgotten about. $500 to Mom. Memo, roof repair 3 years ago, $300 to Walt. Memo. Golf club dues. His back must have been feeling better that month. $200 to Sophie. Memo, books. It was a death by 1,000 paper cuts, a slow, steady bleeding out that I had facilitated because I was too busy, too distant, and too desperate to be loved to ever check the wounds. As I scrolled through my email archives looking for Venmo receipts, I stumbled on an old thread. It was from Aunt Luann 2 years ago, forwarding a generic family update email. But she hadn't just forwarded the email. She'd forwarded the entire chain, buried deep in the replies, a subthread I'd never bothered to read at the time. It was a group chat, mostly my mom, Luann, and another aunt. They were planning a baby shower for a cousin. Aunt Luann, should we ask Skylar to fly? In my mother's reply, time-stamped. No, absolutely not. Don't bother her. She's right in the middle of her busy season at the bank. Let's just let her rest. She's always so tired. We'll just tell her about it later. It was the don't be dramatic defense. Just don't tell Skylar about the party until after. It just makes it easier. She gets so stressed trying to make everything perfect. It's better this way. I stared at the words. It's better this way. It wasn't for my good. It wasn't to save me pressure. It was to save them the inconvenience of my presence, my standards, my feelings. I was difficult. My money was easy, but I was difficult. So, they had streamlined the process. They had kept the money and cut out the person. The coffee was bitter and cold, but I kept drinking it. My hands were freezing. The calm I'd felt this morning was gone, replaced by a vibrating, low-frequency rage. I started digging, not just in my bank archives, in my personal email, in the finance folder where I keep my own mortgage documents, my car titles, my 401k statements. I have a subfolder labeled Family Tax Stuff. I'd saved scans of documents for them, helped them with their returns a few times when Walt claimed TurboTax was too confusing. It was mostly old 1099s for Walt's pre-retirement gig, and some itemized medical receipts for Mom. And then I saw it. A file I didn't recognize. A file name that made no sense, Invoice Notary SVC, as 0514. The date was from 5 years ago. May 14th. I opened it. It was an invoice for $75 from Aldridge Notary Services. The line item read, Mobile Notary Services, Refinance Documentation, Whitworth Residence. The invoice was addressed to Margaret Parker, but it was in my folder. She must have forwarded it to me to be reimbursed or filed, and I just dumped it there, unthinking. Refinance documentation. I own my condo in Santa Barbara. I have one mortgage. I have never refinanced anything. I have never co-signed anything for them. That was my one hard line. I would help, I told them, but I would not go on the loan. My blood went cold. Not the metaphorical cold from before. A real physical, extremities going numb chill. A refinance 5 years ago. That would have required my signature if they'd somehow. But they couldn't have, unless they did. This wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. This wasn't just being left out of a party. My mind, the finance-trained, analytical part of me, started connecting dots. A refinance. Why? To pull cash out of the house I was paying the mortgage on. I looked at the top of the invoice. Janice M. Aldridge, certified notary public, and an address, an office on North Monroe. This was no longer a family drama. This was a financial investigation. The story had changed. The pain in my chest, the grief over being excluded, was suddenly and violently overshadowed by a much colder, sharper, more terrifying possibility. I wasn't just the ATM. I might be the collateral. My fingers were shaking, but not from cold, from adrenaline. I googled Janice M. Aldridge. She was still in business. Same address. The website was basic. A picture of a smiling, grandmotherly woman holding a notary stamp. I clicked the Schedule Appointment button. I booked the first available slot. 10 a.m. Tomorrow. Reason for visit, document verification. I paid for my coffee, my head spinning. I walked back out into the snow. The sky was darkening. The street lights flickered on. I got back to the Airbnb. The sad little plastic tree still dark in the corner. I thought about Julia's words. That isn't love. That is dependency. I stood at the basement window, watching the snow bury the city. I'd spent my entire adult life making sure their lives ran smoothly, making sure the snow was always shoveled from their walk, that their lights stayed on. I had done it, I realized, not just because they asked, but because I was terrified of what would happen if I stopped, terrified they wouldn't love me, terrified they wouldn't see me. I watched a car spin its wheels on the icy street, making no progress, just digging itself deeper into the drift. I whispered the question into the cold glass. If I stop? I asked the empty room. If I just stop paying, will they even see me at all? Or will I just disappear? I had a sickening feeling that I was about to find out. I didn't sleep. The night after the notary discovery was a long, cold vigil. I sat in the dark of the Airbnb, the grey light from the snowy street outside painting a rectangle on the far wall. The appointment with Janice M. Aldridge was at 10 a.m. That left me 4 hours. 4 hours where the financial infrastructure I had built was still standing. 4 hours where I was still technically the person holding up their world. The rage from yesterday had cooled. The vibrating, low-frequency anger had settled, hardened and sharpened into something else, purpose. The auditor in me had taken over. The emotional daughter, the one who wept at "Don't be dramatic," was gone. In her place was the finance professional, the one who manages risk and liquidates toxic assets. At 6:17 in the morning, I opened my laptop. The room was silent, save for the hum of the small refrigerator. My hands were perfectly, abnormally steady. There was no tremor, no hesitation. I logged into my bank. The muscle memory was profound. I'd logged into this portal thousands of times, but always to check their status, to confirm a payment had cleared, to move money from my savings into the checking account that acted as their slush fund. This time, I navigated to the Bill Pay Transfers tab. Scheduled payments. The list appeared just as I had written it in my notebook, the tidy column of my own financial ruin. I moved the cursor to the first line item. Pioneer Home Lending, $2,180. Scheduled January 1st. I clicked Manage. Then I clicked Cancel this recurring payment. A small, polite pop-up window appeared. Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment series? This action cannot be undone. I thought of the 9-foot Christmas tree. I thought of the red cashmere sweater, and the matching family Christmas photo. I thought of my mother's voice, "Don't be dramatic." I clicked Confirm. The line item vanished. Just like that. 7 years of financial servitude erased with a single click. The main support beam of their entire life was gone. I moved to the next one. Avista Energy, $290. I clicked Cancel. Spoken City Utilities, $340. I clicked Cancel. This wasn't just the house anymore. This was the heat, the hot water, the lights that blazed behind their perfect family photo. I felt a brief, sharp pang, not of guilt, but of power. The chilling realization that I'd been holding this switch for 7 years and had never considered flipping it. I had been so terrified of their anger that I had paid for their comfort, even as they discarded mine. One more. This one wasn't on the bank portal. This required a separate login. I went to the Gonzaga University Bursars portal. I logged in as an authorized pair on Sophie's account. Her balance for the spring semester was sitting there, red and demanding. My credit card was listed as the default payment method. I didn't just cancel the payment. I navigated to Payment Profiles. I clicked Manage. My Visa card was listed. I clicked Delete. Are you sure you want to remove this payment method? All scheduled payments associated with this profile will be cancelled. I clicked Confirm. I logged out. 3 clicks, maybe 4. It took less than 90 seconds to dismantle an entire ecosystem. I closed the laptop. A profound, echoing silence filled the room. The refrigerator hum seemed louder. I waited for the wave of guilt, the crushing filial piety that had been drilled into me since my father died. I waited for the panic, the what have I done? It never came. I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel vindictive, or triumphant, or even angry. I felt clean. It was the absence of a great, crushing weight. It was the feeling of taking off a 70 pounds backpack I'd been forced to wear since I was 25. I hadn't even realized how it had contorted my posture, my life, my relationships until it was gone. I got up and went to the tiny kitchenette. I had stopped at a thrift store yesterday, after the coffee shop, needing a single tangible object that was mine in this city. I'd found a coffee mug. It was heavy ceramic and a pale, speckled blue. On the side, in simple black lettering, it said, "My house, my rules." I made a cup of instant coffee, the only thing the Airbnb offered. It was bitter, but it was hot. I sat at the small table, holding the warm mug, my new, ridiculous 10-cent mug, and I watched the grey light of morning fill the room. My phone was on the table, silent. At 9:01 a.m., it lit up. The sound of the text alert was abnormally loud in the quiet room. It was from my mother. "Good morning, sweetheart. Something strange. The bank just sent an alert that the tuition payment for Sophie failed. Must be some kind of year-end system error. Can you call them?" I stared at the message. The casual presumption. Must be an error. The immediate assignment. Can you call them? Not, did you stop it? Not, is something wrong? The system was simply broken. And I was the designated repair technician. I let the message sit unread. I took another sip of coffee. My house, my rules. 90 seconds later, the phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophie. Sky OMG. I'm in the registrar's office and they said your card was declined. I can't register for my classes for spring. My senior capstone is full. Can you fix this right now? I think the system is broken. The panic was evident even in text. The entitlement was breathtaking. Fix this. The assumption again that this was a mistake, that the flow of money was a natural resource like gravity, and it had temporarily failed. I read her message. I pictured her standing in the registrar's office, indignant and inconvenienced. I set the phone face down. My phone rang. The screen lit up. Mom? I watched it ring. 1, 2, 3. It went to voicemail. My hand was steady. My coffee was still warm. The peace I felt, the cleanliness, was still there. It hadn't been breached. I opened my little black notebook, the one from the night of the audit. I turned to a new page. I wrote one line, silence isn't punishment, it's a boundary. They had used polite silence to exclude me from their family. I would use absolute silence to build a wall around myself. The phone buzzed. A new text. This one was from Walt. Skylar, your mother is very upset. She says the bank isn't working and Sophie is hysterical. Whatever is going on, just handle it. It's causing a lot of drama for us this morning. Just get it sorted out. Handle it. A lot of drama. Get it sorted out. I, the source of the drama on the 26th of December, was now being tasked with fixing the drama I had created on the 27th. The irony was so bitter it almost tasted like the coffee. I finished my drink, stood up, and rinsed the mug in the sink. I put on my coat and my boots. The snow from Christmas had turned overnight. A cold, miserable spoken rain was falling, turning the streets into a landscape of grey slush. I walked out into it. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't care. I walked for an hour. I walked past the sad, closed-down storefronts, past the brick buildings of Gonzaga, past the river, swollen and grey. The cold rain soaked my hair and the shoulders of my coat. It was biting, uncomfortable, and real. Every drop felt like it was washing something away. It was washing away the guilt. The 7 years of feeling perpetually indebted to them for what? For existing, for being successful. It was washing away the obligation, the sense that their comfort was my responsibility, their stability, my burden. It was washing away the hope, that stupid, stubborn, childish hope that if I just paid enough, did enough, decorated enough, they would finally turn around and see me. They saw me. They saw me as an open line of credit. And I had just closed the account. When I got back to the Airbnb, I was soaked through, chilled to the bone. My phone was on the table, a frantic beacon, 12 missed calls, 7 new texts, 4 voicemails. I stripped off my wet coat. I toweled my hair dry. I made another cup of instant coffee in my new mug. And then I sat on the couch, sipped my coffee, and I let the phone ring. It started again, almost immediately. Mom? The ringtone, a cheerful, generic chime, filled the small apartment. It was frantic. It was demanding. I just listened. It wasn't a summons anymore. It wasn't a leash pulling me back. It was just noise. It was the sound of the engines sputtering. The sound of a machine long taken for granted, finally running out of fuel. It was, I realized, the new soundtrack to my life. And in the silence between the rings, I finally, for the first time in a decade, felt a flicker of absolute, unadulterated peace. I had my appointment with Janice M. Aldridge in 20 minutes. It was time to find out just how deep the rot really went. I arrived at the address on North Monroe at 9:50 in the morning. It wasn't an office building. It was a small, converted craftsman bungalow, the kind with a painted wooden porch that creaked under my boots. The name Aldridge Notary Services was painted in neat, old-fashioned gold leaf on the glass part of the door. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. A text. I didn't need to look. I knew the sender. I declined the call that followed it, switched the phone to silent, and pushed the door open. A small, tiny bell chimed. The office smelled exactly as I had imagined it, old paper, the faint, acidic tang of printer ink, and a hint of stale coffee. It was the smell of bureaucracy, of rules followed, and forms filed. A woman with practical, short grey hair looked up over her glasses from a desk that was buried under stacks of manila folders and binders. "You must be Schuyler," she said. Her voice was brisk, not unkind. "Janice Aldridge. Your appointment said document verification." "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised at how steady it was. "I'm auditing some family financials. I believe you notarized a document for my family, Parker, about 5 years ago. A refinance on a property on Whitworth." Janice nodded. "All business." "Parker." "All right." She swiveled in her creaking office chair to face a long row of grey, 4-drawer filing cabinets. 5 years ago. You said, do you have a month? "May," I said. "Around May 14th. She grunted, pulling open a heavy drawer labeled 19, then thumbed through the heavy binders before pulling one out. "Parker, Parker, Parker," she murmured, running her finger down a page. "Yes, here we are. May 14th, and 8:30 p.m. Signing at the Whitworth address. That was a mobile job." "You went to the house," I stated. "I did," she tapped the entry in her logbook. "A refi package. Lender was Pioneer. Let's see. Signers, Margaret Parker and Parker." My stomach, which had been cold all morning, now felt like it was filled with cement. "Parker. That's me, Schuyler." Janice looked up at me, her gaze sharpening. She was no longer just a clerk. "You don't remember signing a refinance package?" "I wasn't in Spokane in May 5 years ago," I said, my voice flat. "I was in Santa Barbara. I have never signed a refinance document for that property in my life." The professional neutrality in Janice's face vanished, replaced by a sudden, weary defensiveness. "This is an accusation, Ms. Parker. My log is a legal document. It says you signed. I check identification for every signer. It's the law." "Then I need to see the identification you checked," I said. "And I need to see the signature." She hesitated, her hand hovering over the book. "I can't just." "I am Schuyler Parker," I said, pulling my own driver's license from my wallet and placing it on her desk. "And I am telling you I did not sign that document. So either your log is wrong, or a crime has been committed." Her lips thinned. She turned the log book around so I could see, covering the other entries on the page with a blank sheet of paper. There it was. Entry, Parker, Margaret S. Address, Whitworth. Time, 8:30 p.m. And in the signature column, 2 names. One was my mother's unmistakable, loopy cursive. The other was S. Parker. It was a forgery, and it was a bad one. My S is a single, sharp, angular stroke, a habit from years of finance work. This S was round, hesitant, and disconnected from the rest of the name. It was the signature of someone who had seen my name, but never practiced it. "That is not my signature," I whispered. Janice Aldridge went pale. She looked from my driver's license to my very different, very sharp signature, then back to the logbook. "Oh," she said. She turned from the logbook and went back to the filing cabinet, pulling the drawer labeled 19 open again. This time, she pulled out a thin file folder. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Okay," she said, more to herself than to me. "Hello, home equity line of credit." "Okay." Margaret Parker, S. Parker signature pages. She spread the documents on her desk and then she stopped. What?" I demanded. She tapped a document that was stapled to the back of the signature packet. "This is why you weren't actually there, Ms. Parker." "I know. I've been telling you that your mother was there," Janice said, reading from her own notes on the file. "And she signed for you as your attorney in fact." The world tilted. "My what?" "She presented a general power of attorney," Janice said, her voice now shaky, her own liability in this becoming apparent. "A temporary POA. It stated she had your authorization for real estate transactions." She pulled the document out. It was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy, a generic template, the kind you can download for $10. My name was typed into the blanks. And at the bottom where the grantor, was supposed to sign, there it was again, the same hesitant, looping, fraudulent S. Parker. And it had been notarized by someone else, a month before. "I have never," I said, the words precise, "granted my mother or anyone power of attorney ever. This document is a fraud, which means the signature you notarized on the HELOC is void." Janice sat down heavily in her chair. "Oh my God, I need a copy of that signature page," I said. "And I need a copy of that fraudulent POA. I can't just." "Janice," I said, my voice cutting through her panic, "you inadvertently, or not, notarized a fraudulent signature based on a forged document. That means a bank gave my mother a loan in my name. I am not here to yell at you. I am here to get the evidence I need to protect myself. You will give me those copies." She stared at me, the calculation happening behind her eyes, her professional insurance versus an accessory to fraud charge. She wordlessly got up and went to the copier. While she was occupied, her back turned. I looked again at the logbook, still open on her desk. I scanned the entry again. Witnesses. There was a name listed in the witness column. ARA Caldwell. My blood, which I thought couldn't get any colder, turned to absolute zero. Mrs. Caldwell, our neighbor for 20 years, the sweet, harmless woman who lived next door to my mother, the one who baked fudge. And then, in the small notes section, Janice had scribbled one line, "Witness pulled from party next door." Party next door. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a physical blow. May, 5 years ago. I remembered that month. I had just closed a huge account at work. I'd called my mother, brimming with the news. She had been rushed, distracted. "Oh, that's wonderful, Sky. Truly. Listen, honey, I can't talk. We just have the church group over for a potluck. I'll call you tomorrow." She never called back. It wasn't a potluck. Or maybe it was. It was a party. A party I wasn't invited to. A party they held on purpose on the same night they were committing felony bank fraud using my name. They'd used the party as a cover. They'd used it to provide a convenient, unsuspecting witness. My exclusion wasn't just a byproduct of their social life. It was a tool for their financial crimes. Janice returned, holding the papers. She didn't look at me. Here, I took them. The forged signature was even more damning in stark black and white. It was pathetic. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer, Janice," I said quietly. I left her office. The bell chimed mockingly on my way out. I didn't go to the rental car. I walked. I walked the 2 blocks from Janice's office to my mother's street. I walked right up the front path of the little blue house next door. I rang Mrs. Caldwell's bell. She answered in a pink fleece housecoat, her face breaking into a surprised, delighted smile. Skylar, goodness, child, what on earth are you doing here? Margaret didn't say you were in town. Come in. Come in. I can't stay, Mrs. Caldwell, I said, stopping her. I'm trying to sort out some old paperwork for my mom. I have a weird question for you. Oh, dear. Paperwork always a fuss. She tittered. Do you remember? About 5 years ago. My mom asking you to witness some bank documents at night. She might have been having a party. Her face lit up. Oh, the spring potluck. Yes, with her famous lemon bars. I do remember that vaguely. A nice woman from the bank came by. Yes, Margaret just pulled me into the kitchen. She said, Elara, be a dear. I just need your signature on this. It's for the house. And you signed it. Well, of course, she said. It was just a formality. Did you see me there? I asked, my voice a thread. She looked baffled by the question. You? Oh, heavens, no. Margaret said you were just buried in work. You know our Skylar. She said that job of hers. She's just too busy to fly all the way out here for this boring stuff. She said she was, oh, what was it? Handling it all for you. To make your life easier. To make your life easier. The echo of it. The same lie. The one they'd used on Christmas. The one they'd used in the group chat. She's too busy. Don't bother her. It's better this way. It wasn't an excuse. It was their modus operandi. It was the cover story they used while they picked my pocket. Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell, I said, my throat feeling thick, raw. That's exactly what I needed to know. I walked back to my rental car, parked down the street. I got in, but I didn't start the engine. I sat in the silent, cold car. I took out my phone. I opened the camera. I took a clear, high-resolution photo of the forged signature on the POA. I took a photo of the signature page of the HELOC. I took a photo of Janice's logbook entry, which I'd snapped when her back was turned. I opened a new secure email. I attached the files. I sent them to Julia. Subject, Vault. Do not open unless I tell you. Then I opened my little black notebook. I turned to a fresh page. I wrote, they didn't just erase me from the party. They held the party to steal my name. This changed the entire calculation. This wasn't about being unloved. This wasn't about being left out. This was grand larceny. This was identity theft. My morning's work. The 3 clicks wasn't just an emotional boundary. It was an act of self-preservation. I wasn't just cutting off a toxic family. I was severing ties with a criminal conspiracy. I had my answer. I wasn't just going to disappear and let their world collapse. I had to make sure they didn't drag me into the rubble with them. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to call my mother. I wasn't going to drive to her house and scream. That's what she would expect. That was the drama she knew how to manage. No, I was going to let the systems I'd put in place do the work, the bank, the law, the paper trail, the truth. The calls and texts on my phone weren't just panic anymore. They were the scrabbling of rats trapped in the walls of the house they had built just before the inspectors arrived. I didn't go back to Santa Barbara. I couldn't. Leaving Spokane now would feel like leaving a loaded weapon on the table. My return flight came and went. I called the Airbnb host, extended my stay by another week, citing a family situation. I was an auditor, waiting for the books to close. The first of the month was my 0 hour. I'd cut the lines on December 27th, but the major payments, the mortgage, the utilities, weren't due to draft until January 1st. The first came and went on a Wednesday, a day of profound, echoing silence. My phone, which I'd turned back on, didn't ring. They were waiting. They were holding their breath, assuming, as they always did, that I would handle it before any real consequence touched them. They thought my silence was a tantrum, a negotiation. They didn't understand it was a verdict. The true impact hit on January 3rd, a Friday. That's when the bank's automated system would officially flag the Pioneer home lending mortgage as past due. My phone, sitting on the cheap particle board desk, didn't just buzz. It sounded like it was having a violent seizure. A rapid-fire cascade of texts. It was my mother. The polite, passive-aggressive confusion from the week before was gone. This was pure, high-octane panic. Mom, Skylar. The bank called Pioneer. They left a message. They said the account is overdue. Mom, Skylar. Why did they say that? It must be a mistake. Call them. Mom, they are charging a late fee. A $60 late fee. And they said something about a property inspection. They are sending someone to the house. The capitalization. The sheer indignity of it. Not the terror of foreclosure. Not yet. Just the profound bourgeois shame of a stranger in a polo shirt with a clipboard being seen on their lawn. Before I could even set the phone down, it rang. Walt. I let it go to voicemail. The notification popped up. I played it. His breezy good cop persona was gone, incinerated. His voice was low, tight, and furious. Skylar, I don't know what kind of childish game you think you're playing, but you've made your point. Your mother is a wreck. A wreck? You know what this does to her. Lan has been calling. Mrs. Caldwell looked at her sideways at the mailbox. This is humiliating. A pause. I heard him take a breath, shifting tactics. Look, he said, his voice forcibly softening. You've had your little tantrum. We get it. You're upset about the party. We're sorry. Now it's done. We just need you to make one payment, just this month's. Just pay this one installment to get them off our backs, and then you can come over, and we can all talk about this properly. That's all we are asking. The addict's plea. Just one more hit. Just enough to get us through the week. The promise of a talk that was nothing but a mirage. I deleted the voicemail. The phone immediately rang again. My mother. I let it go. The voicemail icon lit up. I pressed play, a grim fascination settling in. This was the voice I hadn't heard in 7 years. Not since the day she'd called me, weeping about Walt's bad back. It was high, thin, and cracking, devoid of all its matriarchal warmth. Skylar, please. Oh, God. Please call me. I don't understand. The power company, Avista. They sent a blue notice. A final notice. Skylar, it's 19 degrees outside. They can't turn off the heat. What did we? Why are you doing this? The neighbors are talking. Everyone at church is asking why you weren't here. Please, honey. Whatever we did, we are sorry. We are sorry. Just call the bank. Please call the power company. Just fix it. Whatever we did, the vague, formless, all-encompassing non-apology, the plea, not for forgiveness, but for me to stop the consequences. She wasn't sorry for the fraud or the exclusion, or the 7 years of financial servitude. She was sorry the lights were about to go out. She was sorry the neighbors were talking. And then the final message in the barrage, a new voicemail. Not Mom. Not Walt. Sophie. My thumb hovered over the delete button. I was done with her. Done with her entitlement. Her breezy fix this demands. But something made me pause. I pressed play. There was silence for a few seconds. Just the sound of her breathing, quiet and unsteady. Skylar, she whispered. It was a completely different voice from the one in the registrar's office. I talked to Aunt Luann. She told me about the party, about you being in town. A shaky breath. I logged into my tuition portal after the card failed. I was so mad. And then I clicked on the payment history. I looked at all of it. From freshman year. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice broke. A raw, genuine, painful sob. I thought my mom and dad were paying some. I thought I had a scholarship. I thought you were just helping, like, with books. Skylar, I didn't know. The last word was a wail. I didn't know you were paying for everything. The tuition, my apartment. I didn't know you were paying for their house, for the mortgage. Oh my God, Sky. I didn't know. I am so sorry. I listened to the voicemail 3 times. The silence that followed it was profound. This wasn't manipulation. This wasn't a transaction. It was the sound of a 21-year-old finally, painfully waking up. It was the first genuine, specific, unqualified apology I had received in my entire adult life. I pressed save. It was the only one. I deleted the rest of the frantic messages from Mom and Walt. My phone buzzed again. A text from Aunt Lan. Lan, Skylar, your mother called me absolutely beside herself. What on earth is going on? We were all so surprised you didn't come by for Christmas dinner. We thought you were just busy, but now Margaret says you're turning off their heat. Is that true? That doesn't sound like you. That doesn't sound like you, the social enforcement, the flying monkey sent in to gather intel and apply pressure. The polite, coded way of saying, you are not performing your assigned function. I typed a single reply, I'm fine, Aunt Lan. Thank you for checking. Her reply was instantaneous. Well, your mother isn't fine and Sophie is devastated. What about the house? I put the phone on silent. I didn't reply. I opened my black notebook. I looked at the line I'd written last week. Silence isn't punishment, it's a boundary. I wrote a new line beneath it. They used polite silence to erase me. I am using absolute silence to find myself. The phone rang again. Julia. I picked it up. They found the landmines, I said. No preamble. I figured, she said. The O wave usually hits 3 to 5 business days after the first of the month. How are you? The real you, not the auditor. I'm clean, I said, testing the word again. It still fits, she said, but now they're escalating. The don't be dramatic has become please. The handle it has become just pay 1 month. Walt's furious. Mom is crying. And that's the part that gets you, isn't it? Julia said, her voice knowing. The tears. It's the part that used to, I said. But it feels different now. It feels calculated, especially after what I found at the notary's office. Exactly, Julia said, her voice hard. It's not cruel to let people lie in the bed they made. And from what you told me, they didn't just make the bed. They stole the mattress and signed your name on the financing. This isn't just fairness, Skylar. This is legal and financial self-defense. Don't you dare light yourself on fire just to keep them warm. Don't light yourself on fire to keep them warm. The phrase hung in the air after we hung up. I realized I had been a human furnace for 7 years. I put my coat on. The cold rain from the morning had stopped, leaving the world encased in a grey, brittle ice. I went to a small shop I'd seen downtown. It smelled like sandalwood and old books. I bought a candle, a single, expensive pillar candle. The label was simple, white with black text, Restoration. The scent was cedarwood and pine. It smelled like a real forest, not a Christmas tree, not a performance, just a forest. I took it back to the Airbnb. The first thing I did was unplug the 3-foot plastic tree that had been mocking me for a week. I unplugged it, carried it out the back door, and put it directly into the apartment complex's dumpster. I went back inside. I placed my new candle on the small table. I lit it. The flame was steady. The rich, woody scent slowly filled the small room, cutting through the sterile, stale air. It was an act of reclamation. I was no longer the guest. This was my space. The sun went down. The blue light of dusk filled the basement window. The candle flame was a single warm point of light. My phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, began its evening assault. It rang. Mom? It rang. Walt? It rang. Aunt Luann? It rang. Mom? Text. 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 Voicemail notification. The sounds were a frantic, desperate chorus, the sound of their world, the one I had single-handedly propped up, finally buckling under its own weight. I watched the candle. The cedarwood scent was rich, grounding. The phone rang again. Walt. I walked over to it. I picked it up. My thumb hovered over the green answer button. The old instinct, fix it. Smooth it over. Stop the yelling. Stop the crying. It was a powerful physical pull, a reflex drilled into me for a decade. I thought of the forged signature. I thought of Mrs. Caldwell smiling. She said, "You were too busy." I thought of the party I wasn't at, the party that was cover for a felony. I didn't answer. I pressed and held the power button on the side. The screen lit up with the option, slide to power off. I swiped my finger across the screen. The phone went black. The room was plunged into absolute, perfect silence. There was only the sound of my own breathing and the soft, steady flame of the candle. I went to bed, and, for the first time since I'd left Santa Barbara, for the first time in maybe 7 years, I slept through the entire night, the deep, heavy, dreamless sleep of the truly, finally free. I woke up in the Spokane Airbnb to the smell of my restoration candle, which had burned down to a waxy puddle. The silence in the room was absolute. My phone, a cold black slab on the nightstand. I had slept for 10 hours, a heavy, dreamless sleep. And I woke up knowing one thing. I was done here. I hadn't just cut them off. I had finished my audit. I had my evidence. I had confirmed the fraud. Staying in this cold, grey city felt like lingering at a crime scene after the police had left. I didn't turn on my phone. I used the laptop. I logged into the airport Wi-Fi. I didn't book a flight back to Santa Barbara. That was my home, but it was still part of the grid. It was the place they knew how to reach me. I needed somewhere else, somewhere disconnected. I booked a one-way ticket, leaving in 4 hours from Spokane to Phoenix. From Phoenix, I would rent a car and drive north to Sedona. I'd never been. I knew nothing about it except what I'd seen in photographs, vast, silent red rock. It looked like the surface of another planet. It looked like the opposite of Spokane. It was the place to go when you needed to be purified by light and wind. The drive to the airport was on slushy, grey roads. I dropped the rental car. I moved through the empty, early morning terminal like a ghost. My phone stayed in my bag, a dead weight, a dormant bomb. The flight was 2 hours, climbing above the thick, wet clouds of the Pacific Northwest. I watched the world of green and grey and white dissolve below me, eventually giving way to the sharp, brutal, beautiful geometry of the desert. Brown and red and ochre carved by wind. I landed in Phoenix. The blast of heat, a dry, bright 70 degrees, was a physical shock. I rented a Jeep. I didn't stop until I was 2 hours north. Pulling up to a small, isolated cabin I'd booked from the Phoenix airport. It was high on a ridge, overlooking a valley of staggering red rock formations. I sat on the wooden deck. The sun was beginning to set, and the rocks looked like they were on fire, blazing orange and crimson against a sky of impossible, aching blue. Only then, in the profound, ancient silence, did I plug my phone in. I powered it on. It was an explosion. It lit up and began to vibrate against the nightstand. A furious, panicked buzzing that went on and on and on. It sounded like a trapped wasp. When the digital avalanche finally stopped, the screen was a sea of red notifications. 78 missed calls, 41 new text messages, 12 new voicemails. The senders were the same three: Mom, Walt, Aunt Lan. I felt a strange, detached curiosity. I opened the texts, scanning the previews, a doctor reading a patient's chaotic chart. Mom, Skylar. The bank is serious. They posted a notice on the door. In broad daylight, Mrs. Caldwell saw it. This is a nightmare. Walt, you are destroying this family. Pick up the phone. This isn't a joke anymore. You are acting like a child. Mom, Skylar, please. We'll pay you back. We promise. We'll set up a plan. Just call the bank. Just make it stop. Please. I'm begging you. Aunt Luann, your mother is sick with worry. She's not eating. This is cruel, Skylar. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. The old lies, the new lies, the we'll pay you back, was the most laughable, desperate one of all. The social pressure from Lan, the shame from Mom, the rage from Walt. I looked at the 12 new voicemails. I didn't need to listen to the ones from Mom and Walt. I knew what they were. They were the texts, but with tears and yelling. But there were 2 from Sophie, the last one I'd saved. These were new. I tapped the most recent one. There was a long silence, just the sound of her breathing. Hi, Skylar, she whispered. It's me again. I just wanted to. I wanted to say I'm sorry again. That's all. I'm not asking for the tuition. I know I can't register. I'm getting a job at the library. A shaky breath. I told Mom and Dad, she said, her voice dropping. I told them I know about the house and the signature. I told them I know what they did. She stopped, as if the words themselves were dangerous. It wasn't good, Sky. It was really not good. Anyway, I hope you're okay wherever you are. That's all. Why? The line clicked. I told them I know what they did. She wasn't just apologizing for herself anymore. She was bearing witness. She was the only one. I scrolled to the very last message, the most recent one, which had arrived while I was driving up the ridge. It was from Walt. The tone was gone. The anger, the fake breezy charm, the desperation. It was just flat, stripped of all pretense. Walt, we spoke to a realtor. We can't cover the mortgage. Not even the HELOC you found. We can't get another loan. We're upside down. We might have to sell the house. Might have to. The last scrap of his pride. But the fight was gone. This wasn't a manipulation. It wasn't a plea. It was a weather report. It was the voice of a man who had finally, after 7 years, hit a wall he couldn't charm, bully, or lie his way through. And my mother, her panicked texts about the neighbors and the church group, had stopped yesterday. Her current silence was more telling. The realtor, the for sale sign that would soon be on the lawn, the public notice on the door, the game was over. The image, the perfect family built on my Tier 12 bonuses, and her neighborhood reputation, was gone. The shame of that, I knew, was a far deeper wound for her than the loss of the house itself. I put the phone down. I looked out at the vast, red, silent valley. The sky was turning a deep, bruised purple. I waited for the surge of triumph. The I told you so. The feeling of victory. It never came. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel anything but clear. The air here was thin and sharp and clean. The fog of obligation, of guilt, of that desperate, childish hope that had choked me for a decade, it was gone. I could breathe. I was just clear. The next day, I drove into town. I went to a small, crowded outdoor market. It smelled of sage and dust. I bought coffee and bread and eggs. I bought a postcard with a picture of Cathedral Rock glowing in the sunset. I took it back to the cabin and set it on the table. In the message space, I wrote a single line to no one: sometimes you have to disappear to be seen. I stayed in that cabin for 3 days. I hiked the red trails. I sat on the deck and read a cheap paperback. I let the silence and the sun bake the last of spoken out of me. On the 3rd day, I took out my little black notebook, the one that held the audit. I flipped to the page with the neat, itemized list of my servitude. Pioneer Home Lending, $2,180. Avista Energy, $290. The receipt for 7 years of my life. At the bottom of the page, I wrote a new sentence: they are finally living in the world I used to carry. I looked at the page for a long time. Then I tore it from the notebook. On a fresh, clean page, I wrote one last thing. Forgiveness isn't rebuilding. It's not forgetting. It's just putting it down. I took the torn-out page, the list of my payments, and I walked out into the dry scrub behind the cabin. The wind was picking up, a cool, dry wind that smelled of juniper. I found a flat red stone half buried in the dirt. I folded the list into a tiny, tight square. I lifted the stone, placed the paper in the hollow, and set the stone back down. A small, silent, unmarked grave. The burial of the dead. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I made coffee and sat on the deck, wrapped in a blanket. I watched the sky turn from a deep, cold black to violet, then to a searing, brilliant orange as the sun broke over the distant mesas. It was the most brutal and beautiful thing I had ever seen. And in that cold, bright, unforgiving light, I knew what I was going to do, which was nothing. I wasn't going to call them. I wasn't going to fly back to Spokane to manage the sale of the house or pack my mother's boxes. I wasn't going to offer them a soft landing, or a loan, or a room in my condo. I would have my lawyer contact Pioneer Home Lending and their fraud department about the HELOC to protect my own name. That was legal action, not an emotional one. I was not the repair technician. I was not their bank. I was not their furnace. They had forged my name. They had built a life on a lie, and they had excluded me from it. Now they would have to live in the truth. I wasn't going back to fix it. I was just going. I finished my coffee as the sun cleared the rocks. I went inside to pack my bag. I had finished packing. The Sedona cabin was clean. My single suitcase zipped and standing by the door. I was booked on a flight back to Santa Barbara, leaving Phoenix the next morning. My period of self-imposed exile, the purification by red rock and silence, was over. I had my evidence. I had my clarity. I had a lawyer on retainer waiting for my signal. I was performing a final sweep of the room, checking for a stray charger, when my phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, rang. I glanced at it. Walt. For a week, I had ignored every call from him and my mother. 78, 80, 90 missed calls. I'd lost count. They were just noise. The frantic buzzing of a system in collapse. But his last text. We might have to sell the house, had been different. It was the white flag. This felt different. 2. This was the loose end. I was leaving the desert tomorrow. And I felt the sudden, clear-headed need to sever this last frayed wire. I picked up the phone. Hello, Walt. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used for clients. He was silent for a second, shocked that I'd answered. Skylar, thank God. You picked up. I'm listening. Walt, we signed the listing agreement, he said. His voice was heavy, defeated, all the breezy charm gone. The sign goes up on the lawn on Monday. Okay, I said. It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement. Your mother. She's here. She's next to me. I heard him take a breath, as if bracing himself. Before this all happens, before the neighbors are walking through the living room, looking in her closets. There's something we have to tell you. Something we should have told you 5 years ago. I waited. The silence of the cabin was absolute. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing on the line. Margaret, I heard him say, his voice muffled, speaking away from the phone. Now you have to tell her. Tell her, or I swear to God, I will. There was a fumbling sound, and then my mother's voice was on the line. It wasn't the strong, warm, matriarchal voice from the church choir. It wasn't the weeping, manipulative voice from the voicemails. This was a voice I had never heard before. It was small, brittle, dead. Skylar, she whispered. I'm here, Mom. The word felt like a stone in my mouth. The bank, she stammered. Pioneer. They called again, not just about the mortgage. They called about the other one, the line of credit. I know about the HELOC, I said, my voice ice. You know. I know you took out a home equity line of credit 5 years ago, I said, my voice flat, unemotional. And I know you did it in my name. She made a sound, a small, strangulated gasp, as if I'd struck her. And then the tears came. Not the performance tears. These were small, wet, hopeless sounds. We were going to lose the house, she whispered. Walt's, his disability claim, it was denied. We had nothing. We were going to lose everything back then, 5 years ago. So you took out a loan. I stated. It was just to get us through, she insisted, a tiny spark of the old, familiar defensiveness flaring up. We were going to pay it back. We were going to pay it off before you ever had to know. It was just to keep things stable, to keep up appearances, Skylar. Just to keep our heads above water. To keep up appearances, I repeated the phrase. Her core motive was so pathetic, so small. You didn't want the neighbors to talk. You didn't want the church group to know you were failing. No, she cried, but it was weak. We didn't want to bother you. We didn't want to worry you. You were so busy. You had just gotten that promotion. You had your own life. I signed the paper, the power of attorney. I signed it to protect you from the stress. I signed it. The confession was so casual, as if she had signed a permission slip for a school trip. You mean you forged my signature? I said. It wasn't an accusation, it was a correction, a clarification for the record. You created a fraudulent power of attorney document. You used a potluck party with Mrs. Caldwell as cover to get a witness signature. You committed multiple felonies, Mom. That's what you did. The line went utterly silent. She was stunned. Not that she'd been caught, but that I had the specifics, that I had done the audit. The silence stretched, and I realized it was the first time in my 32 years that I had stated a hard, ugly truth, and she hadn't replied with, "Don't be dramatic." I had killed her favorite weapon. She started to cry again, a low, defeated moan. We were just trying to protect the family. This was it. The final rotten beam of the house. I had to push it over. Mom, I said, and the cold clarity I'd felt in the desert was in my voice. I am not your savior. I was never here to protect the family. I'm just the one who has been forced to clean up your lies. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. For the first time, there was no argument. There was no defense. There was no counter-accusation. There was just the cold, hard, empty space where the lie used to be. I heard Walt take the phone back. His sigh was a heavy, rattling sound. She's done, he said. I know. We are moving, he said, his voice flat. All the fight was gone. Signed a lease on a duplex over in the valley. It's small. Okay, I said. He paused. And for a second, I heard something real. A flicker of the man he was before he'd let her reputation devour him. It's temporary for her, he said, as if talking to himself. A stopgap, but it's honest for me. I guess it's the first honest thing we've done in a decade. Temporary for her, honest for me. The admission split them in two. He had accepted the collapse. She was just enduring it, already planning the next lie. I heard her scramble for the phone. Ask her, she hissed at him. Walt, just ask her. Ask me what, Mom? I said, my patience gone. Her voice thin and terrified. Shaky. Skylar, do you? Oh, God, do you hate us? The question hung in the dry desert air. Hate. Hate is a hot, binding, powerful emotion. It's a chain. It requires an attachment, an energy, an investment that I no longer had. Hate is the other side of the love I'd been fighting for. I looked out the window of the cabin. The red rocks were indifferent, ancient. No, Mom, I said, and I was surprised to find it was the absolute truth. I don't hate you. Oh, Sky, thank God. I just don't need the old kind of love anymore, I interrupted, my voice quiet, but final. The kind I have to pay for. I hung up. I didn't wait for her to reply. The click of the call ending was the last sound, the final lock. I stood in the silent cabin. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel triumph. I felt finished. I felt the way I do when I found the last rounding error in a 7-year audit. I clicked save and closed the file. I looked at the small Kiva-style fireplace in the corner of the room. And I looked at the black notebook on the table, the one I had bought in Spokane, the one that held the audit, the page that said, "Why am I doing this?" The page that said, "It's time to review the portfolio." The list I had buried under the rock outside was the physical receipt. This notebook, this was the process. This was the logbook of my own misery. My own slow, dawning comprehension. I had the evidence. The photos were with Julia. The lawyer had his copies. I didn't need this anymore. I picked up the black notebook. I didn't tear out a single page. I walked to the fireplace. I opened the small cast iron door. I placed the notebook inside. On the cold grate, I struck a match, the sulfur sharp in the clean air. I touched the flame to the corner of the first page. It caught, it flared. I watched the cover curl, the plastic spine melting. I watched the pages turn brown, then orange, then black. I watched the ink of my own meticulous, painful audit, Pioneer Home Lending, Avista Energy, Gonzaga University, vanish into illegibility. The black ash of the pages curled and lifted, rising up the chimney. It looked like a column of deleted receipts. A final transaction being zeroed out. Gone? Not just buried. Erased. That night, my last night in the desert, I stood on the deck. I had left my bags by the door, ready for the morning. The sky above Sedona was overwhelming. It wasn't the dim, hazy sky of a city. It was an explosion of cold, sharp, brilliant light. A black velvet void, punctured by a million stars. I felt it then, the two things coexisting. I felt incredibly light. The 70 pounds backpack of their survival, the one I'd worn for a decade, was gone. And I felt incredibly heavy. Because the truth is a heavy thing to hold. The truth that my family was never my family. The truth that the love I had been starving for was a mirage. That's a heavy thing to carry. My phone, sitting on the patio table, lit up. Not a call, a text. It was Julia. It was as if she could feel across 1,000 miles that the loop had finally been closed. Freedom feels like a void at first, like you're in freefall. That's how you know it's real. I looked at her words. I looked up at the vast, silent, starry void. She was right. It was a void, but it was my void. And I was finally free to fall into it. I was back in Santa Barbara. The flight from Phoenix had been a simple logistical move. I walked out of the sterile airport into the cool, damp air of the coast, the grey ocean, so different from the sharp red certainty of the desert, stretched out to the horizon. My condo was exactly as I'd left it 3 weeks prior, silent, clean, and smelling faintly of sea salt and dust. It was the same space, but I was a different person walking into it. I had left as Skylar Parker, the beautiful daughter. I returned as just Skylar. Before I unpacked, before I even checked my mail, I sat at my desk. The ritual in the desert, the burial of the list, the burning of the notebook, was the emotional severing. This was the practical architecture. This was me, the finance professional, changing the locks on my own life. I logged into my email. I created a new one, a simple, professional, unfindable address. I logged into my bank. I went to Manage Payees. I clicked Pioneer Home Lending. I clicked Delete. I did the same for Avista Energy, Spoken Utilities, and the Gonzaga Tuition Portal. I went to my Zelle contacts. Mom, Walt, Sophie. Delete. 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 I changed my password. The prompt asked for a memorable phrase. I typed, "No is complete." I called my cell phone provider. I sat on hold for 15 minutes. The bland music, a neutral backdrop to the final administrative cuts. I separated my line from the family plan. I was no longer the primary account holder. The billing responsibility for the other 3 lines, my mother's, Walt's, Sophie's, would now revert to them. The customer service rep was confused. "So, you're just removing yourself?" "I'm creating my own new account," I clarified. The other lines are no longer my financial responsibility. I took a yellow sticky note from my desk drawer. I wrote the words I had used as a mantra in the desert: silence. Silence isn't punishment. Silence equals self-respect. I walked into my kitchen and stuck it on the front of my stainless steel refrigerator. A reminder, the new architecture was built. The doors were locked. The new rules were set. And right on cue, the outside world began to pound on them. My phone, now on its own new, clean account, lit up. A text from Aunt Lan. Lan: Skylar. This has gone too far. Your mother is packing. Packing in boxes. This is tearing the family apart. I am hosting a dinner this Sunday at my house. A reconciliation. You, your mother, Walt. We will fix this. I looked at the words, reconciliation. Fix this. She still saw this as a broken appliance. She wanted to fix the ATM. She wanted to patch the drywall and pretend the foundation wasn't rotten to the core, poisoned by felony fraud. Boundaries, I realized, don't need a public announcement or a potluck dinner. They just need to be held quietly and firmly. I texted her back, I appreciate the thought, Aunt Lan, but I won't be there. This isn't something a dinner can fix. Her reply was instantaneous. You are breaking your mother's heart. I didn't reply to that one. A voicemail notification appeared. Sophie. It was long, 6 minutes. I put the phone to my ear and listened. Hey, Sky, she began, her voice small. So the sign is on the lawn. The for sale sign. It's real. Mom, your mom is not good. She sits in the kitchen and cries. Walt just packs boxes. He doesn't talk. She took a shaky breath. And I was so mad at first. At them for lying to everyone, for lying to me. But I was mad at you, too. I was like, why did you have to do it now? Why did you have to blow everything up? Couldn't you have? I don't know. Just talk to them. I listened, my hand resting on my desk. But then I was packing my own stuff, she continued, her voice thick. I'm moving back in with my dad. I found all my old high school yearbooks and I found all the stuff. The jacket from the ski trip, the laptop for graduation, and I realized you paid for all of it. All of it for years. You weren't just my cool older cousin. You were my provider, and I never even saw it. She was crying now. I get it now. I think talking wouldn't have worked because they don't hear. They just wait for you to be done so they can get what they want. I'm sorry, Skylar. Not just for the tuition. I'm sorry for my whole life, for what I took from you. I saved the voicemail. That was the second and only real apology. I sent her a single text. I'm okay, Sophie. Learn how to stand on your own feet. You can do it. And then the final salvo. The phone rang. Mom? I let it go to voicemail. I was prepared for the tears, the begging, the pleas. I was not prepared for what I heard. It wasn't the brittle voice from the confession. It was a howl, a raw animal sound of pure, undiluted narcissistic rage. Skylar. A man from Pioneer. He came to the house. He nailed a notice to the front door. A public notice of sale. The realtor's sign is on the lawn. And now this. In front of everyone. Caldwell was walking her dog. She saw him do it. She crossed the street. She wouldn't even look at me. The shame. That was all it was. Not the fraud, not the loss. The shame. You did this, she shrieked. You let this happen. You pulled one string and you made everything collapse. You destroyed us. You destroyed your family. I listened to the message. The blame was so total, so perfect in its vacuum-sealed lack of self-awareness. She wasn't wrong. I had pulled the string, but she would never, ever ask why the entire structure was a house of cards built on my stolen name. I deleted the message. I didn't need to save that. A few minutes later, a text message from Walt. It was the last one I expected. Walt, Skylar. The duplex is grim. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. But she'll be okay. She'll find a new church group. She'll make new friends to lie to. I just wanted to say one thing. I was a coward. I let her do it. I stood by and I let her forge your name, and I reaped the benefits. That's on me. I let my wife turn my stepdaughter into a bank. And I'm sorry. I don't want anything. I don't expect a reply. Just, I'm sorry. I read the text 3 times. I don't want anything. It was the first communication I had ever received from either of them that didn't have an ask buried inside it. An apology with no strings. A confession with no expectation of forgiveness. I saved it. I powered off my phone. I was sitting in my own living room in Santa Barbara. The restoration candle, the one I'd bought in Spokane, the one that had been my totem in the Airbnb and my anchor in the desert cabin, was sitting on my coffee table. I had packed it, half burned, in my suitcase. It was the only thing I'd brought back. I lit it. The familiar scent of cedar wood filled my own home. It was the smell of clarity. I sat on my sofa in the quiet, watching the flame. The sun went down over the Pacific. The cabin lights in the desert were gone. My condo filled with the blue light of dusk. I watched the candle. The wax was a deep, liquid pool. I watched it all night. As the first grey light of dawn began to touch the ocean, the flame flickered, pulled on the last of the wick, flared brightly for 1 second, and then it went out. The room was plunged into the half-light. The rich, woody scent was gone, replaced by the sharp, final smell of a snuffed-out wick. The ritual was over. The role I had been playing for a decade, the provider, the savior, the bank, the daughter. It was finished. The performance was done. That morning, I woke to the scent of my own home. Not the sharp cedar of the restoration candle that was gone, a cold, hard circle of wax on my coffee table, just the faint, clean smell of sea air and the dust of my own life. I turned my phone on. The barrage was over. The panic had burned itself out. The frantic energy of their calls and texts now just a memory. There were only 2 new messages, both quiet, both final. The first was from Walt. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a plea. It was a single, flat statement, it's done. The bank auction was this morning. The house is sold. I stared at the words. The house I had paid for. The house I was excluded from. The house where my name was stolen. It was gone. Sold on a courthouse step to a stranger. It was a neat, tidy ending. I deleted the text. The second message was from Sophie. I start the library job on Monday. It's not much, but it's a start. I'm okay. It was the first time she had ever declared her own independence without asking for anything. It was 4 words, I'm okay. That signaled a new beginning. I texted her back, good. Work hard. I was finished. The house was gone. The family I knew was gone. The money was gone. But there was one last piece of architecture to build. One final legal wall. But first, an emotional one. I wasn't going back to Spokane. I would never go back. But I had one last thing to send there. I sat at my desk, the one overlooking the Pacific. I took out a single sheet of my best stationery, thick and cream-colored, with my own simple monogram at the top. Not a black notebook, not a list of debts. I took a pen and I wrote 2 sentences. I hope you find peace in the truth. I hope, in the future, you learn to invite before you take. That was all. It was not an accusation. It was not a plea. It was a closing statement. I folded the letter. I put it in a matching envelope. I wrote Margaret Parker, Spokane, Washington on the front. I did not write Walt. I did not write a return address. I did not put their new, humiliating duplex address on it. I walked down to the street to the blue USPS mailbox on the corner. I did not put a stamp on the letter. I pushed the heavy metal slot open and I dropped the unstamped, unaddressed, unreturnable letter inside. It would go to the post office. It would be flagged as insufficient postage. It would end up in a dead letter office. Unread, undeliverable. It was a letter to nowhere. It wasn't for her to read. It was for me to send. It was the final formal act of releasing my role. I was no longer the emotional postmaster for this family. The mail was no longer being delivered. I turned from the mailbox and walked down the street. Not home, but toward the branch of my own bank. The emotional cutoff was complete. Now, the legal one. I was wearing a blazer. I felt like I was going to a deposition. In a way, I was. I didn't go to a teller. I had made an appointment. Skylar Parker, to see Ms. Chen, I said to the concierge. Chen in the prompt. My apologies. I will correct that. Skylar Parker to see Ms. Albright, I said to the concierge. She led me to a quiet, glass-walled office. Ms. Albright was a woman in her 50s. Sharp, with a no-nonsense air. Thank you for seeing me, I said. I am here to report a case of identity theft and file a fraud affidavit. She nodded. All business. Okay. Do you have the documentation? I opened my briefcase. I laid out the file Julia had been holding, the high-resolution photos of the forged power of attorney, the signature page from the 5-year-old Hellock, the copy of Janice Aldridge's notary log. Ms. Albright looked at the signature on the POA. She looked at the signature on the Hellock. Then she looked at the driver's license I had placed on her desk. That is not you, she stated. No, I said. It is not. This appears to be a family member. She looked at the name on the forged document. Margaret Parker, your mother. Yes, I said. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. Ms. Parker, you understand that filing this affidavit attesting that this is a forgery will initiate a formal criminal investigation. The bank will seek to recover its losses. They will refer this to the authorities. This was the moment, the final door. My mother had asked, do you hate us? Hate was hot. This was cold. This was not about sending her to jail. That was her consequence, not my intention. This was about protecting myself. This was about severing my name from her debt forever. This was the no that was complete. I understand, I said, my voice perfectly steady. My signature was forged on a loan. I need my name legally removed from that liability, and I need a permanent high alert fraud warning placed on my social security number, locking all new credit inquiries until I approve them personally, by phone. Ms. Albright nodded, satisfied. She printed a single document. This is the affidavit. I need you to sign here, attesting under penalty of perjury that you did not sign the loan documents. She pushed the paper across the desk. I picked up the pen. I signed my name. Skylar Parker, the real one, the sharp, angular, adult signature. It was clean. It was final. We will handle it from here, she said. I walked out of the bank. The air in Santa Barbara was cool, the sun bright. The world looked exactly the same, but it was not. A 7-year invisible chain had just been legally dissolved. I walked home. As I opened my condo door, my phone buzzed. A text from Julia. Julia, just checking in. Heard you were back. Welcome home. Freedom looks good on you. I smiled, a real, small smile. I texted her back, it really does. I walked into my kitchen. The sticky note was still on my refrigerator. Silence. Self-respect. I looked at it for a long moment. The words of the woman I was in Spokane. I didn't need the reminder anymore. I peeled the yellow note off the stainless steel. I was no longer silent. I had spoken clearly and legally in a language the bank understood. I didn't need to remind myself to have self-respect. I had just done it. I walked to my big sliding glass door and opened it. The sound of the Pacific, the real, breathing, living ocean, filled my quiet condo. The tide was coming in. The house in Spokane was gone. The 9-foot tree was long gone. The plastic tree was in a dumpster. The candle was a cold puddle of wax. The black notebook was ash. It was all gone. And in its place was everything. I stood there, breathing in the cold salt air. And I let the void Julia had talked about finally fill up, not with anger or grief, but with me. I thought about the house, the one that had been carried on my back for 7 years, and I looked out at the vast, open, grey-blue horizon. When you finally stop carrying someone else's house on your back, what on earth do you build with your own 2 hands? The story ends here. The story has concluded. The story has concluded.